Many people think that there's a conflict between science and the Christian faith. They would argue that the latest advances in science make belief in God unreasonable, render the Bible unbelievable. But is this really the case? I'm joined today by Dr. Russ Carlson. You're a biochemist and a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't think of a better person to help answer some of the concerns that people might have about, again, the conflict between science and the Christian faith. You're a biochemist, and you study the inner workings of the cell, life at its molecular basis, at its most fundamental basis. And Scripture tells us that God is revealed through the record of nature. So my question is, as a biochemist and as a Christian, do you see God's fingerprints in biochemical systems?
Well, yes. I think someone once asked me, "What do I see when I study? That's evidence for God in my science and what I do?" And when someone asks me that question, my mind sometimes just goes blank, But the first thing that came to me was, well, everything, and the reason I say that is that the more we find out how the cell works, the complexity, not just the complexity, but why it's complex and how it works, the more evidence that this requires an intelligence behind it. For example, in the production of energy for the cell and in the synthesis of proteins that are necessary for the cell to occur. And there are actually molecular machines with many multiple moving parts that all have to be there and all have to be functioning for energy to be produced, for example, chemical energy, which we know as ATP, for example. That all those parts have to be there for it to be produced. If one part's not there, it doesn't work. In protein synthesis, when we have a whole mechanism, a machine called the ribosomal complex, it involves many different types of a molecule called ribonucleic acid. It involves 52 different proteins in bacteria. And if one of them isn't there, it doesn't work. So they all need to be there for these systems to operate. And that's hard to imagine how that can come about by random mutation and natural selection gradually over a long period of time. When all the parts have to be there for the function to occur. That concept was coined, the first time I read a lot about it was in a book by Michael Behe. It's called Irreducible Complexity. Now certainly people have come up with evolutionary explanations for those kinds of things, but I think a better explanation is that, a better one that fits, is that it comes from design. One of the things that's often you hear critical arguments about theistic positions in sciences is that, you just think you just believe in the God of the gaps, right? So you just believe that if it's too complex to understand, you invoke God as an explanation, when in fact it's really precisely just the opposite. It's because of what we understand about the complexity. This multiple moving parts, the whole flow of information and regulatory mechanisms and metabolic pathways and how they all have to work together and how they're working together, that seems to support the idea of a mind and an intelligence as the source.
It's interesting to me that I, as a biochemist myself, that my experience is that biochemists, whether they are believers or non-believers, all marvel at just the elegance and the sophistication of biochemical systems. But yet non-believers are going to reject any kind of theistic implication for that elegance and sophistication. But yet, in my experience, though they may reject kind of a design perspective on biochemistry, they seem like they can't get away from design. What's your experience with that?
Well, I think, I would agree with that. In fact, Francis Crick, the discoverer of the structure of DNA, I think he has a book that was called What Mad Pursuit, and in that book he states that when we look at the cell, we have to keep in mind that it was not designed. And so even though he, is an agnostic atheist, he doesn't like the idea of God, he recognizes design in the cell. And he said we always have to keep in mind that it was not designed. And others of his persuasion have the same point of view. So all of us see design in the cell. I look at the cell and I see design, and I think it's real design. And he looks at the cell and he sees design, and he has to deny that it's real design. And so that's where the that's where the problem is, for them. And I think it's real, and I think the evidence shows that it is real. So that's a better explanation for me.